Magnus Corfitzen, CEO of Ascelia Pharma, just got IPO'd main market. Please.
Yep. So, warm welcome. Looking forward to sharing the Ascelia Pharma story to all of you. So some of you are, I recognize the faces, you know the story. Some of you may need a refresher, and some of you are new to the story. Warm welcome to all of you, and look forward to sharing what we do. So we're focusing on patients living with cancer. We do that by developing novel drugs that address high levels of unmet medical need in rare cancer indications, orphan oncology. So, as Homan mentioned, last week we had our first day of trading at Nasdaq Stockholm, main market, took in 200 million. And now we have a fully financing of the phase 3 program of Mangoral, so we can bring the product all the way to the market. So we had a significant oversubscription, both by highly recognized institutions and private investors. So share price trading has been decent. So obviously you always want to have good trading, but we had good volume and positive development, even though it's fallen a little bit back. The ownership structure is quite diversified. We have some of the old major shareholders, Sunstone and Neurosun Healthcare, still large but smaller, and then Handelsbanken Fonder, Altro Invest, and AP4 coming into as large shareholders. So, what is it that they have invested in? They have invested in the company, the people, but also our two assets, Mangoral and Oncoral. So Mangoral is an imaging drug. It's a drug given to patients before they go into an MRI scanner to visualize the liver, to look whether cancer is in the liver or spread to the liver. It can be used in patients with poor kidney function. All the products available today have risk of potentially deadly side effects for those patients. Mangoral does not have this risk, and that's why we have the orphan drug designation from the FDA. And when we get to market, we expect that to be in the beginning of 2022. We will have no competing products in a market worth $350 to $500 million in US, Europe, and Japan. We will start enrolling into the phase 3 clinical program second half of this year, and we expect to report the result of that trial at the end of next year, end of 2020. The other program that we have is Oncoral. It's a tablet formulation of a well-known, widely used chemotherapeutic agent that is given as an infusion directly into the bloodstream today. Oncoral is a tablet. The purpose of that is obviously better convenience for the patient, but we also believe that giving adequate daily doses will have a better safety profile than the massive infusion dose that is given today. We reported data at ESMO, the largest European cancer conference last year, from the phase 1 study, and the results seem to support that hypothesis. So briefly, we have a very strong team who've worked very hard to get this financing in place. We also have our Chief Medical Officer, Carl Bjartmer, here in the room. So strong experience in various parts of the drug development world. We have a very experienced board, number of global and regional product launches in the pharmaceutical world, deep expertise in orphan drug development. And Hans Meyer is one of the most experienced people in medical imaging drugs in the world. So moving into our lead asset, Mangoral. So what is it that Mangoral is doing for patients? So it helps to identify liver metastases when cancer is spreading to the liver. And why is that important? Well, it's important because you don't want your liver to look like this. You want to find it early and do something about it. And when cancer spreads to the liver metastases, that's a very common problem in oncology. 70% of patients with colorectal cancer will develop liver metastases at some point during their course of disease. But also other cancer types, such as breast cancer, lung cancer, gastric cancer, and I could continue the list. It's very important. And in very many cases, liver metastasis is the cause of death, and it's also very often the first site of metastasis. So finding it early is very important. So how can you treat that? First you need to find it, and you need to visualize. That's where the scanner comes in. The most sensitive, best way to find liver metastasis is with an MRI scanner and using an imaging drug based on gadolinium. That's injected into the bloodstream. It's a toxic heavy metal. It's very efficient for enhancing the images, but it also has some toxicity issues, as we'll come back to. That's what is used today. That is the gold standard for liver metastasis. So when the images have been made, then a panel of doctors will look. It will be the radiologist, it will be the surgeon, it will be the oncologist, and they will look at the images, and then they will determine what is the right treatment strategy for this patient. And in case surgeon is surgery, removing by a surgical procedure, if that's an option, then that's what they go for, local therapies or drug therapy. So why does this matter? Well, it turns out, and that has been proven again and again, that if you can treat liver metastasis with surgery, then you have a better survival outcome. This is one example, a group of patients with colorectal cancer, metastasis in the liver. One group got drug therapy. After 5 years, 6% were alive. The other group got surgery first, and then similar drug therapy, and 46% were alive after 5 years. So that's a massive difference. You can only do liver surgery of metastasis if you detect them early, and that's why you need a sensitive method. MRI using gadolinium. But gadolinium is not for all patients. Some patients have poor kidney function. And because the kidney is the organ that is used to flush out the gadolinium, this heavy metal, if the kidney is not working very well, it accumulates in the body. And in some patients, something called nephrogenic systemic fibrosis develops. It's a very severe disease. It's potentially life-threatening. It's fibrosis of skin, joints, potentially inner organs, and there's no treatment. So the authorities around the world have issued this black box warning, which basically says that patients with poor kidney function are at risk of this condition if they get a gadolinium agent. So if there's any way of not giving gadolinium to this patient, you should do that. So in practice, what happens is that a patient referred for liver MRI scan, could be for any other organ, if they have risk factors defined in this black box warning, age above 60, diabetes or hypertension, high blood pressure, then they have a blood sample taken to assess the kidney function. Most patients will have a normal or near normal kidney function. They will get a gadolinium drug. But the ones with poor kidney function today, they are not getting an imaging drug. So they're getting a scan without the imaging enhancing drug, producing a lower quality image. And that's exactly the target population, a very well-defined unmet medical need that Mangoral is targeting. These patients, poor kidney function, for an liver MRI. And we don't need to go out and educate patients or the medical community about we have something better here. They have this screening procedure already. They have these patients in their clinical practice, and they don't know what to do with them. And we have, you could say, a plug-and-play solution. And this is 280,000 patients. So even though it's an orphan designation, orphan drug, it's quite sizable patient population in US, Europe, and Japan. So Mangoral, it's a novel imaging drug. As I said, we had orphan drug designation. I'll show you a picture in a minute, but it's very efficient for enhancing healthy liver tissue, and cancer is obviously not healthy, so that is not lighting up. Because our Mangoral is based on manganese, which is known to enhance imaging signals on an MRI, but it's not gadolinium. And gadolinium is associated with NSF. NSF is a reaction to the gadolinium. So we don't have that risk. And it's also different in the way that gadolinium is injected directly into the bloodstream, circulates in the entire body, and potentially accumulates. I'll come back to that in a minute. But Mangoral is different. It's a powder. It's mixed with water, and the patient will drink it. It goes into the stomach, small intestine, and directly from the small intestine goes into the livers. And we're utilizing, you'd say, the natural physiology, because we all need manganese. Very small amounts. We get it in blueberry, pineapples, using the same uptake mechanism. So the manganese goes into all the healthy liver cells. We light up, get some beautiful pictures. And then there is, you could say, a protective mechanism from the liver, goes back into the intestine. It doesn't go into blood circulation in any meaningful amount. So that's very interesting and gives us a very good safety profile. So there's, we are the only clinical trial company Mangoral is the only one in clinical development for looking for liver MRI that is not based on gadolinium. So just to provide an example, and some of you may have seen it before, this is a patient from one of our studies. Patient is lying on his back, feeds toward you, and the liver is on the right-hand side, so this is the liver. And you can see some black spots. A radiologist with some additional images would say that these are gallbladder, blood vessels, etc. So this is the quality that they would have. Then this patient had Mangoral, and you can obviously see that certain parts of that image is more white. The more white is all the healthy liver cells that have taken up manganese, taken up Mangoral. And what is also clear here is that there's a very distinct black spot, which metastasis, which is not visible over here. So this is the difference we make in terms of adding to, you could say, the current standard today. That metastasis would have been missed with the current standard of care. With Mangoral, they would see it, and the radiologist would meet with the surgeon and the oncologist, and they would discuss, should we do surgery? And remember the increased survival of patients getting early surgery from the beginning, 6% 5-year survival to 46. So that's the kind of difference that Mangoral can make. So we have had a meeting in November last year where we presented the data from our 6 clinical studies where we had very good safety and efficacy data, and we presented our plan for the phase 3, and this is what we have for the phase 3 plan based on the FDA discussion. So we will, after the summer, we will start enrolling patients. We need approximately 200 patients, where we will show that when we compare an unenhanced image and Mangoral in combination, the combined information of that is better than unenhanced alone. That's what we need to prove. And how do we measure that? Well, we measure, the endpoint is lesion visualization. So we look the number of lesions in these 200 patients. How many black spots do we find more than unenhanced alone? We also look at semi-quantitative and semi-qualitative parameters, and that is like lesion conspicuity. So that's a very fancy word for how bright is the liver compared to the black spots. And we see, and we've seen that in all our trials, that the liver is much clearly brighter than without the Mangoral. And we also look at the delineation, how clear are the edges. And those are very important in clinical practice because the doctors want to, when they measure patient response to drug therapy, they want to look at the black spots. Are they growing or are they shrinking? If they're shrinking, the drug therapy works, you should continue. If they're growing, patient is not responding to therapy, and they should do something else. So that's why that's a very important parameter. One other aspect of this is a little bit unusual for drug development is the fact that this each patient will be their own control. It's not a randomized study. So first, they will come in the morning, they will have a scan unenhanced, then they will have Mangoral, and then later they will have a scan with Mangoral, and then we basically have all the data we need for efficacy. We will follow the patient for 3 days to look at any safety signals that could show up. But it's a very short study, and it's having each patient at their own control from a statistical perspective is a tremendous advantage. So that's the phase 3 trial design. We will enroll patients after the summer, and as I said, expect to have top-line results end of next year. So what's the size of the market? So we've been asking ourselves that question quite a lot. We've also got that from investors quite a lot. So there's no product out there. So we are pioneering this work, and we have this space and have looked at various different ways of estimating and coming to more or less the same market size. So there are 280,000 patients in Europe, US, and Japan that are in need of a product such as Mangoral. So the use of that is not just a single-time use. They will have it initially when they're diagnosed, and then for follow-up to additional when they're measuring the response and the course of the disease. So, for instance, what typically happens is a patient will have a drug regimen approved. So the doctors will say, dear cancer patient, we want to give you these 3 drugs. And then we will follow you for a period of time, and then you will come back for a new scan, and then we will see whether the black spots have actually increased in size. That's how they do it. And the cost of that is typically $20,000 or even more per patient per month. So when the doctors say, get these 3 drugs for 3 months, that's a $60,000 check. and they evaluate whether these $60,000 are working based on the image. And they can either measure it based on the unenhanced image with blurry black spots, blurry metastases, where it's hard to know the exact measurements, or they can have a Mangoral enhanced scan, where they get clear edges, much higher confidence in that they're actually giving these expensive drugs to patients that need them and are where the drugs work. So we have been talking to more than 25 payers, healthcare part of the healthcare system that pay for the drugs, both in US, and in Europe, both public and private. And we said, this is what Mangoral does. These are the patients we go for. And this is how we're thinking in terms of positioning and use. We also discussed separate reimbursement codes and price points. Based on the feedback there, we feel that a price point of $1,500 to $3,000 per dose is a reasonable level. And with that range, the healthcare system will save money overall by using Mangoral, because they will have earlier detection of liver metastases, so they can have better health outcomes. They can have more cost-effective use of their dollars. And in the big course of things, this is a very small amount in treatment of cancer patients. So this is a very, very attractive opportunity. That's focusing on patients with poor kidneys that are identified in the screening procedure that is already part of clinical practice. I mentioned earlier that when patients are injected with gadolinium in the bloodstream, some of that gadolinium accumulates in certain parts of the body. That has been known for a while. In the last couple of years, it has turned out consistently and in many publications that the brain is one of the organs where gadolinium accumulate. And gadolinium, as I mentioned initially, is a toxic heavy metal, and you don't want that in your body, and you most definitely do not want that in your brain. The big question is, what happens with gadolinium in the brain? And the answer is that nobody really knows at this point, because the data is not there to make any conclusions. So the health authorities, FDA, EMA, PMDA, they have all been looking at the data and the lack of data, and they said, we don't know enough, but at this point we need to add additional warnings to all gadolinium products that patients, regardless of kidney function, will accumulate gadolinium in the brain. They've also requested all manufacturers of gadolinium products to do a lot of research and document what happens. And that will continue for the next 5-10 years. So we will continue to see a lot of new data coming out on the safety of gadolinium products. So from our perspective, it's very good to have a non-gadolinium product in this space. So this is not, you could say, our market focus. Our key focus, razor-sharp focus here is on patients with poor kidney function, $350 to $500 million. But obviously, when all this research goes on the brain accumulation, if it turns out that there are certain patient groups that are particularly fragile or sensitive to gadolinium in the brain, those could become relevant for Mangoral as well. So we've been looking into the commercialization, and with the financing in place from the IPO, we will not only initiate the phase 3 clinical study, but we will also ramp up even more on the commercial preparations. So based on our understanding of the market today, we believe 10 to 20 sales rep would be sufficient to generate a significant penetration in the American market. The reason is that these patients have an underlying kidney disease and cancer, which means that they do not go to the small hospitals. They are referred to the major hospitals, and that's feasible to access them via a smaller sales force. So we'll recruit a chief commercial officer who will lead this effort, and then we will make the analysis. So the plan is to launch in beginning of 2022. So outside US and Europe, we will definitely partner, but we will evaluate Europe and US. So how can we say that this is something a small company can do? Well, we will do our best, but it's always helpful to have a good example. One such example is Blue Earth Diagnostics, a UK-based company, and they have developed a high-value diagnostic drug called Accumulation. It's used in completely different indication. It's for men with prostate cancer who have had a prostate cancer surgery, and then based on blood biomarker PSA rising in the blood, a suspicion of cancer coming back, that's a target population. So again, like Mangoral, it's a very well-defined patient population with a high level of unmet medical need. And that's where you can get a good pricing. Axumin is priced at $3,500 per dose and priced and reimbursed, both in US and Europe. And there are 60 people. They're commercializing in Europe and in US. And they're very successful. So last 6-month period numbers we've seen is 35 million pounds and growing 50% every 6 months. So it's a very impressive trajectory from their side. So that was on our lead program, Mangoral. The other program we have is Oncoral. Very, very exciting program a bit earlier. As I said, we've completed phase 1. So what is Oncoral? It's a tablet formulation of irinotecan, a well-known, widely used chemotherapeutic agent. So as I mentioned, having daily doses instead of giving a huge, massive dose all at once that is intended to last for weeks is much better. That's well known in you could say with many other drugs, and there are certain other chemotherapeutic agents like 5-FU that has been made into a tablet formulation. Xeloda for Roche. That product had 1.3 billion Swiss franc in revenue before going off patent. So a very interesting opportunity. And in particular with Xeloda, which is the former Roche product, that product is used together with irinotecan to generate the FOLFIRI, which is a chemo combination. And what we can do with Oncoral is we can take Xeloda, which is already on the market, combine with Oncoral and have an all-tablet-based FOLFIRI. We think from many perspectives, both patient perspective and healthcare cost perspective, we think that's going to be very, very interesting. So how are we positioning in this? So I mentioned the injectable versions are on the market. So there are 2 versions, Captosar, and then there's an improved formulation called Onivite. They are both injectables. One in Europe and US, Captosar is approved for colorectal cancer, the other one for pancreatic cancer. We're developing Oncoral for the treatment of gastric cancer, stomach cancer, and that's a strategic choice based on the data available. There's a potential for orphan indication, which we think is a more efficient way to develop the drug. We also know that irinotecan as an injectable is approved in Japan for the treatment of gastric cancer. So we know the irinotecan molecule, the active metabolite SN38, when it gets into the body, it's effective in treating gastric cancer. So we're utilizing that to mitigate risk. And we get a very strong response from the oncologists that treat gastric cancer when we discussed Oncoral with them. So very happy with this opportunity leading forward. So running a little low on time, so I don't have so much time, but what I can say here on the phase 1 data that was presented at ESMO, the major European Cancer Conference, is that we saw a good safety profile. So same type of side effects as with the injectable, but generally much milder. We also, one of the particular issues, hematological toxicities with irinotecan, is that when patients are injected with irinotecan, the level of white blood cells, which are important in the immune system, the level of white blood cells goes down. And sometimes very dramatically, sometimes in a way that they cannot get more doses until a washout period. We saw very little hematological toxicities in this study. So, and we had some, in some of these patients, these are, as usual in phase 1 oncology studies, patients are very sick, have tried a lot of different, and we had some indications of activity, which is very encouraging. So looking ahead, we will have a very interesting news flow. So we will initiate, we are fully operationally involved in getting the study going. We will enroll patients after the summer and then having results end of 2020, end of next year. And based on that, we will file for approval and could potentially launch the product in US and potentially also Europe in beginning of 2022. First half of this year, we will report some follow-up data on the Oncoral phase 1 study. We will report the use of Oncoral together with Xeloda, the all-tablet FOLFIRI regimen. We think that's going to be very interesting. And then we will finalize the design of the phase 2 study. So looking ahead, how we're creating value is that our key focus is on Mangoral as of today. So we consider that the low-hanging fruit. We have a phase 3 program that we have discussed with the FDA based on the data where we have, I didn't have time to show you the data in detail here, but we have very compelling, very strong data from the phase 2 program. we're using the same endpoint for the phase 3 study. So we think we have a high likelihood of success in bringing it all the way. And the extensive commercial analysis and validation we've done is very encouraging and gives us hope that this could be one of the top-selling medical imaging drugs in the world. Oncoral is the next wave of value creation, and we think the all-tablet FOLFIRI chemo combination is very, very interesting. And the Onivyde, the improved injection version of irinotecan, was acquired 2 years ago for more than $1 billion. So very attractive opportunity. Further down the line, we will look to in-license or acquire additional programs that have the same profile within orphan oncology, where we understand the mode of action, we see a clear need in the patient community that this product can address. Thank you.